We're going to get started this morning. I want to welcome everyone to the fourth meeting of the Interim Joint Committee on Economic Development, Workforce Investment for the 2021 Interim. At this point, I'm going to ask Sasha if she will call the roll. I ask each member when you're answering the roll to indicate in their response whether they are here in my Frankfurt office, or here remotely. Sasha, would you please call the roll?
Senator Gardler, Senator Carr, Senator McDaniel.
Here remotely in the 23rd Senate District.
Thank you. Senator Mills, Senator Southworth.
Here in the room.
Senator Storm.
Here remotely in my district.
Thank you. Senator Thomas, Senator Wheeler, Senator Wilson.
Here remotely in my Senate district.
Thank you. Senator Yates.
I'm here remotely by Zoom for my Senate district.
Thank you. Representative Baker.
Present.
Representative Banta. Representative Beckler.
It's a little early for me, but I think I'm here in the room.
Representative Bojanowski. Representative Bray.
Present from my district.
Thank you. Representative Brown. Representative Callaway.
Here in person.
Representative Cantrell.
I'm here from my home in District 38.
Thank you. Representative Elliott. Representative Freeland.
I'm here remotely.
Thank you. Representative Gentry.
Here remotely today.
Thank you. Representative Hart.
Present on site.
Thank you. Representative Huff.
Present in the room.
Representative Johnson. Representative King.
Present in the room.
Representative Kulkarni.
Present in the room.
Representative Lawrence.
Present remotely from my district.
Thank you. Representative Lockett.
Here in the room.
Representative Rowland.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Representative Sharp.
Present in the room.
Representative Sheldon.
Present for my district.
Thank you. Representative Tackett Lafferty.
Present remotely.
Thank you. Co-Chair Schroeder. Co-Chair Weber.
Present in the room. All right. Again, welcome everyone to the committee. For those of you participating remotely, our committee staff is monitoring the chat function in the Zoom application. If you have a question or want to make a comment, please indicate in the chat box if you would like to ask a question or make a comment. You can also let staff know that you are present in the chat box if we didn't get you during the roll call. If you are participating remotely, please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. And I want to let everyone know that the meeting materials for today are available on the LRC website with the committee meeting link. Before we begin today, I would like to offer some congratulations to Senator Schroeder, Co-Chair Schroeder and his wife Marcy, on the birth of their daughter, Sophia Lynn, on September 3rd. And I'm sure that his children, Grace and Trey, are very excited to have a new baby sister in their home. So, Senator Schroeder, we offer you our congratulations and very happy for you this morning. We do have a quorum. Can I have a motion for approval of the minutes? We have a motion from Senator Wheeler, second from Representative Callaway. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, no. Minutes are adopted. We do have a pretty busy agenda today, so I want to get started as we jump into it. The first item on the agenda is unemployment insurance for victims of domestic violence and abuse. This is a piece of legislation that was sponsored by Representative Kulkarni and co-sponsored by Representative Heverin. At this point, I'd like to ask them to come forward to the desk. Introduce yourselves for the record. Any folks that are here that will be presenting with you remotely or in person, ask them to introduce themselves as well. And after you've done that, you can begin your presentation to the committee.
Hello, I'm Samara Hevron, and I'm the 18th District State Representative.
I'm Nima Kulkarni. I'm the State Representative for District 40. And I'd like to introduce our guests, the presenters as well. Thank you, first of all, Chairman Weber and colleagues for your consideration of this legislation today. We are joined by Tanya Thomas from Springhaven, Jillian Carden from Silverleaf, and Katie Showalter from the University of Kentucky, who will be the primary presenters on this issue. This is something that I've worked on for the past few sessions that was brought to me by a constituent. And it's an issue that is, at the same time that it is desperate and urgent, something that is also clouded with silence and a lot of stigma attached to it. And so we have a lot of statistics that you're going to hear in terms of how many people this is going to impact, and whether or not it's going to allow them essentially to live fuller lives, to be able to work in safety and provide for their families. So I'm going to hand it off to whichever one of our presenters wants to go first, Tanya, Jillian, or Katie, to give you all a little bit more information and more data into several nuances and aspects of this issue.
I can start. Thank you everyone for having me. My name is Katie Showalter, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Kentucky in the College of Social Work. And I have been studying gender-based violence and employment for about 8 years now. So this is something that's very important to me. Gender-based violence is extremely prevalent in the state of Kentucky. Kentucky is the second highest state in the US for rates of domestic violence, with 1 in 3 women and 1 in 8 men experiencing in their lifetime. Similarly, sexual and stalking are also very prevalent here, higher than national averages. And I'm sure, as you know from the news, those rates have only increased during the spread of COVID-19. Victimization in all 3 forms that I mentioned has a huge price tag. About $15 million is spent on domestic violence costs alone of healthcare and loss of productivity in the workplace. And sexual violence and stalking also is a frequently impacted form of violence, with survivors experiencing about 15 days of work loss per year. Victims are financially dependent upon their abusive partners, oftentimes by design. Abusive partners strategically control their victims' finances. Specifically, what I look at is the way they control their employment. And my research shows that when you are experiencing intimate partner violence, you can be unemployed for up to 6 years, even after that abuse ends. So it's a very long process. And the reason is because of the mental health and the physical well-being and that impact that it has on the victim. That's also true for sexual violence victims and stalking victims. It also greatly impacts their well-being, and they struggle in the workplace. Specifically, there is a fear of re-victimization that I think you'll hear from the other presenters on. Income loss is a huge issue for survivors, but it's also tied to the loss of other resources like social relationships and benefits for the survivor. So it's really like a chain reaction that survivors are experiencing. However, there is definitely a lot of hope in the idea of getting unemployment insurance for these survivors. So unemployment insurance is proven to help people get a job faster, and also to find a job that they are genuinely passionate about and that has a higher income than the first job that they might find. That's really important because nearly 3 million people have been unemployed just this month in the US. And those rates are highest among women, not only in the US, but also in Kentucky. And that's really unique because that hasn't happened since the 1990s. And so we are seeing lots of unemployment, and specifically unemployment insurance would really help victims who are experiencing intimate partner violence, sexual violence, or stalking to regain that stability in their life. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I can go next. My name is Dr. Jillian Carden. I'm the Executive Director at Silverleaf Sexual Trauma Recovery Services. We are a dual rape crisis and child advocacy center serving the Lincoln Trail Ad District. We assist individuals and families every day in the aftermath of sexual violence. And the ripple effect, like Catherine was saying, is it impacts every aspect of their life, and really vice versa. It's not uncommon for victims to lose their jobs following a sexual assault. So I just wanted to give you an example this morning. I never dreamed of being a single mom with 2 kids. Their dad and I split 6 years ago. He said he needed freedom, so off he went. We were devastated. But I was raised with the pull yourself up by your bootstraps attitude. So the kids and I moved into a little house, and I got myself a job that paid the bills and gave us some benefits. The hours were terrible, and I didn't really like the job, but it's what we needed to get by. Last year, I met Owen when he started on the same shift crew at work. We went on a few dates, and eventually I asked if he wanted to meet the kids. They instantly fell for him. One day at work, I was asked to cover an extra shift. Overtime pay would be great, but I needed somebody to watch the kids. So I called Owen and asked if he would be willing, and he said he was glad to. So I got home that night exhausted from the long day. The house was quiet. And Owen said that homework was done, pizza was eaten, and the kids made it to bed on time. And I told him how much I appreciated everything that he did and helping me out in a pinch. It started with a hug and a kiss. And then things started feeling different. He was acting different. So he led me down the hall, and I told him I didn't want to. I was tired and the kids were home. He shut the bedroom door, and then he raped me. I didn't want to scream because I didn't want to wake up the kids, and I didn't want them to be afraid. I couldn't believe what was happening. And when it was over, he kissed me on the cheek and he said, "I'll see you at work tomorrow." I didn't sleep at all that night. I was afraid he was going to come back. When the sun came up, I got up and I showered and I got the kids off to school and I called into work. I told him I was sick and I couldn't make it in. I called in the next day too, and the day after that. I couldn't sleep. I felt anxious all the time. I would sit in the parking lot across from the school, terrified that he was going to show up and check the kids out and take them away. And it didn't help that Owen kept texting me like nothing had happened. My boss called to check in. I said I was still sick. I didn't think I would be able to make it in. and he's always been really kind to me, but he said, I really need you to come in. We're short-staffed, so unless you have a doctor's excuse, you have to come in. I didn't have a doctor's excuse. I had to go in. I couldn't pay the bills without this job, and Jake has asthma. So I drove to work for my shift. I had a panic attack on the way there. I thought I was going to wreck. When I got there, I rounded the corner, and I saw his car. I couldn't go in. In fact, I couldn't go back to work. Not there. I lost my job. I lost our house. I lost my kids. And I love them more than anything in the world. I wanted to provide for them. Things just started really spiraling out of control, and I just needed some time. I am angry. I am hopeless. I'm hurt. I'm afraid, and I never asked to be raped. My social worker said, I need to go to therapy. I need to get a job. I need to get stable housing, and I need to stay off substances, which, by the way, I've never used. And I would love to do all of this, but I have no idea how to make this work because I can get a job, but they're not going to let me off for therapy or court. But I need a job to get a place to live. I just wish I could turn back the clock a year ago when being a single mom was hard, but bearable. Because being a homeless, jobless, rape victim without my kids is a lot worse. This story is at the core of the story of so many victims that we provide services to. The assault can last for minutes, but the impact can last a lifetime. Victims want to work. They want a better life. They want to pay bills. They want to be good parents, and they want to be productive community members. And they're willing to do what it takes to get it done. But sometimes it just takes time. So we need this bill. We need this bill to provide some respite so that victims can access that unemployment insurance so that they can attend court and they can go to therapy and they can focus on their healing so that they can get back into sustainable employment. Please pass this bill. Thank you.
Tanya, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
You
Can you hear me?
You can go ahead and make your statement, comments.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to all the representatives, and thank you today for listening to my testimony on this very important issue. My name is Tanya Thomas, and I'm the Executive Director of Spring Haven Domestic Violence Program in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. We serve also the Lincoln Trail Ad District and are the shelter for the military on Fort Knox. Throughout my 21 years at Spring Haven, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of survivors of domestic violence, as well as their dependents, come through our doors of what I like to call our temporary home. Some of you representatives have been here, and you can definitely say it is not the epitome of what you think a shelter is. It is a temporary home. Most of you are aware that financial abuse is one of the primary tactics that perpetrators use to keep their partners trapped in an abusive relationship. If you can be kept at home, you can be controlled. 83% of domestic violence survivors report their ability to work was negatively impacted by an abusive partner. Tragically, these tactics often evolve and escalate when survivors decide They want a part in providing for themselves and their families by working a job. Sometimes it has to be the abuser's idea that they go to work. They use verbal abuse to make them feel less than, and saying that they are not contributing to the household, so they let them get a job and setting them up for failure. Throughout my tenure at Spring Haven, I have seen many faces that have found their path to financial independence only to endure further abuse, trauma, domestic violence related obstacles from maintaining stable employment. If you're wondering what that looks like, if you would just picture with me this. It looks like Sarah, whose abuser insisted that she get a job because she was lazy and she contributed nothing to the family income. After gaining employment, Sarah was made to call in sick several times. She was made to call and say she had no transportation. She was called and say she had no daycare. After a while, Sarah was no longer a dependable employee. Her employer had nothing to do but not put her on the schedule anymore. It also looks like Jennifer, who's made to feel like she is not anything but a mother and a cook. So she has to get a job. After a week on the job, the phone calls and the texts begin. And we all know at most places, you're not allowed to get personal phone calls and texts. And so when they're not answered, then the harassment begins. The partner will often go to the place of employment, sit out in the parking lot, drive around the building, and if they can, they will go and sit in the lobby and or reception area and just sit. When it was time for Jennifer to get off work, of course her ride was there, and she went home, and then the abuse began again. Not being able to handle this pressure and embarrassment, of course, Jennifer quit. These two stories I've told you, I have heard hundreds and hundreds of times. Different days, different years, different faces. It starts an entirely new cycle of crisis. I call it poverty mentality. When women are in shelter, they begin to hoard things that we give them freely every day. Shampoo, conditioner, toilet paper, paper towels. And you say, why would they do that? They don't ever want to be out without that again in their life. They have no hope of stability. Representative Kulkarni and Hebron's bill will provide a critical safety net for survivors like Sarah, Jennifer, and hundreds of others. Attention. By allowing them to maintain basic stability for themselves and their children until they find new employment, while also sparing them and their families from further trauma and hardship. And as I close, Spring Haven encourages survivors to leave dangerous and abusive situations. We help them towards healing, recovery, stability, and having autonomy over their own lives. Survivors need protections from their abusers. We need to support survivors who have lost a job due to domestic violence so they can stay safe and get back to work quickly without long-term effects on their financial stability, credit, and well-being. I truly believe that this bill by Representative Kulkarni and Hebron is a strong step in the right direction. And thank you all so much for your time this morning.
I'd like to thank all of the presenters, and I think we can take questions if any committee members have them. I just wanted to go over very quickly some parameters of the bill before we do that. There was a fact sheet distributed to the members that was compiled by the Kentucky Association of Sexual Assault Programs and Kentucky Coalition Against Domestic Violence, who I've worked closely with to craft this bill. And I just want to, point out a few provisions. This amends the unemployment insurance statute, which is KRS 341, and it allows for survivors to provide documentation. So there is an evidentiary requirement for this, which includes court records, police records, sworn statements, statements from shelter workers like Silverleaf and Springhaven, attorneys, healthcare providers, etc. Benefits are charged against the state's pooled account, so this is not a separate fund that's established for employers that they would have to pay. There is a provision in there that the Kentucky Office of Unemployment Insurance would be trained. They would provide training for their employees on domestic, dating, sexual and stalking violence, and benefits applications that are submitted within the context of this legislation. And there's also a provision for the Secretary to send an annual report to us for the number of claims filed, so that we can have some data collection and a better understanding of the scope of this issue in Kentucky. And with that, Chairman, I guess we can open it up to any questions.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Then we do have a question from a member. So it was indicated earlier that about 3 million folks are unemployed that would fall in the U.S. that would fall under the parameters of this bill or qualify for it. Can you give me some kind of idea as to, first of all, how many states participate in a program similar to what you've outlined in your bill, and also what kind of numbers are we talking about in terms of individuals, and maybe if you have that for a state that is close to Kentucky that's comparable?
Sure. So I can say to date we have 39 states, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Washington, D.C., have some sort of legislation that pertains to extending unemployment benefits to survivors in these situations. The changes within the variations within those statutes are with evidentiary requirements, with how much regulations are promulgated by the agency versus the legislature. This particular bill has a fairly open evidentiary requirement. Some of them would not, for instance, allow a sworn statement by the survivor or sworn statements by people that were close to the situation. They would need court records, police records, hospital records, things like that. But to your question about the number of individuals in Kentucky, I do not have that because we don't really have a way to track right now which of these situations fall under the provisions of this bill. In states that have legislation to this effect, the general conclusion is that the costs have not been burdensome to employers. They've remained low because not a lot of these claims are filed or benefits paid. I don't know about states bordering us, but I can get you that information. We've got some data for Connecticut and for Montana. So in Connecticut, like the last 2 years, the cost of benefits paid was about $169,000. In Montana, the average cost of benefits paid in a year ranges from $25,000 to $60,000, with an average of 20 domestic violence-based claims, 2 sexual assault and stalking-based claims in about a year. But I can get that information to you as much as we have it, because again, there's not a lot of information or data specific to how many claims would fall under the provisions of this particular bill.
I understand. Thank you. Let's move to our questions. First is Representative King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, presenters, and our ones online as well. I certainly appreciate your testimony today, and I appreciate committee staff getting this to us so we could read over it before today's meeting. And Representative Kulkarni touched on my question. It would be under 6B, the documentation that you expanded on. My question just regarded, could the employee give a sworn testimony within their own employment area, or do they need to go to these outside organizations that you spoke to? I guess I'm asking, could they just go to their HR department and provide a sworn testimony there? Would that suffice for the documentation needed for your bill?
It would be allowed under the bill. I think we would want, it depends on the parameters that we lay out for whatever the final statute would be. We can be as evidence-based as we want to. One of the issues that we have are people not comfortable going to their own HR departments because the HR departments may not necessarily be very well versed in these situations, and they have their own duty in terms of liability that they might say we're not going to entertain this or provide anything in writing for purposes of unemployment benefits. So we're not sure. I guess the answer is in that context. But yes, it would be allowed under this bill. It would be any kind of documentary evidence that the survivor could provide, to prove this situation and their need for unemployment coverage.
Okay, just one quick follow-up, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. So the employee could go to any of the other organizations that you mentioned, and several of those are outlined in the draft, and then the HR department would be required to take that in. They would need to accept that sworn statement from an outside organization.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, that's
perfect,
right.
Perfect.
Yes,
Thank you.
Representative Huff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the bill, and I haven't read it all the way through, so it could be in there. Is there a time limit on the amount of time that a person can draw the unemployment? And one reason I ask, I think the first speaker said in some cases it can be years before they're employable again.
So the time limit would be the same as anybody that would be eligible for unemployment benefits. So as long as the condition persists that made them eligible, they would continue to be covered. It doesn't change anything about the unemployment benefits process. It just adds this category to cover this particular population.
All right, thank you.
Senator Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative Huff asked one of the questions that I had, and I guess as maybe a follow-up, obviously to, at least in normal times, I'm not talking about what we've gone through lately with COVID, you're required to go out and look for alternative employment. Obviously, given some of the other difficulties which were eloquently described here today, that I could see where there could be some issues, especially probably on the front end when they're just experiencing their victimization, that might prevent them immediately from going to get other employment. But would there be any requirement, at least, that they go to counseling or attempt to obtain the necessary care that to try to overcome this, to get back into the workforce in order to draw these benefits?
So there's not a requirement per se to get counseling. I will point out that there are in other states provisions that waive requirements, like you're actively searching for a job because you're going to counseling or trying to get back on your feet after a situation like this occurs. But there is not a mandate for counseling, and there's not this waiver in this particular version. But talking to stakeholders and talking to members, certainly that can be added to allow them to pursue that much needed therapy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Southworth.
Okay. I guess on the same topic, I was looking at this page 3. One of the reasons is the worker believes leaving work is necessary, and then at the end, the sworn statement by the worker. And as we were discussing the stories, and I can think too how this would probably work, in this situation, you get really frozen and don't want to talk to anybody, and also do not want to move any pieces in your life at all. And so I think, and you can stay frozen for a very long time. And I think what we're hearing stories of is, explaining how these people get frozen and they don't know what to do. And so they don't do anything. And so one of the things that concerns me is the language that allows them to independently make this decision and also make statements on their own, because I think, especially if we're going to support them with employment coverage, we need to be pushing them out the door to talk to somebody. You know, the rest of the list is a great list. They've got to get out of their shell. Just like anything else, it's not going to be easy, but we have to push them to get to the center, the shelter, the clergy, the mental health, whoever. That I think has to be the goal, because it is taking that first step, and instead of, letting things get more stuck over time, while they're, I guess, fresh, pliable, whatever, you get out there and get some help and have that person helping them, I think would be the only way that we could even see them getting out. Because if they can make their own statement and get through this themselves, then they're still alone and they're still frozen. And I don't see that long-term working. You mentioned evidence-based. I'm not sure. There's tons of studies out there. I'm just thinking in real life, how my brain works. And I know a lot of these people are, my age range. Certainly not all, certainly not same demographics. And I mean, definitely there's a wide range of people that are affected. Everybody can be affected. But I'm just saying, thinking through mentally where I would see this and people I've worked with, that would be my main concern that I think we could work on.
And I appreciate your comments, and we'll take that into consideration, certainly. This is still a work in progress, so we're going to try to pre-file it in October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. But before that, we're going to take into consideration comments from members and stakeholders as well. And I think my co-sponsor had something.
And this kind of goes to Senator Wheeler as well as Senator Southworth. I think Dr. Card made a good point, too, though, about employment, is that making sure, they're not always able to go to counseling because the job might not allow them. So hopefully we can find a middle there that is helpful with the employee and employer, but also, just to be empathetic. I think it's hard to push somebody to do counseling until they're ready. I would hate for us to put a mandate for them to go to counseling when they're not ready to deal with the issues that's been in front of them. Although they're making a statement, they could be making a statement to feed their children, or they could be making a statement just to keep their home. So I do think we need to be careful there with not putting a mandate to do counseling, but obviously willing to have conversations regarding that.
Our final question on this discussion is going to come from Representative Callaway. Afterwards, I would encourage any members that do have questions, if you can reach out to Representative Kulkarni and Representative Heverin. I know they'll be happy to answer those for you. Representative Callaway.
Yes, thank y'all for the presentation. Some of the questions that I had have already been asked. I think in my mind that the goal is rehabilitation. So if we're getting involved in their life with this situation, how do we put things in place so that they actually get through it? And I know that's hard for us to be involved from a legislative standpoint, but to be able to help them, truly help them financially, enables them to maybe move forward with their life. And so mandates or not mandates, I think it's definitely worth discussing of how do we put something in place that allows that to happen. The other thing I was going to ask is, has someone spoke with the cabinet about that specific training? How would that training go for people that will be processing these claims? And has there been any discussion with the cabinet about that yet?
There was discussion prior to the bill being filed this last session, and I think that it was just going to be rolled into whatever their training is now. I was not made aware of any additional costs or burdens to the cabinet, but I will make sure to get that updated information from them.
Representatives, thank you all for your presentation. Again, I encourage any members that have questions to reach out to these legislators and ask them.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members, for your time.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the Kentucky Affordable Housing Act. That is legislation, I think pre-filed by Representative Bridges. There he is. Representative Bridges, if you'll come forward, bring anyone with you that will be testifying on the bill. Introduce yourself for the record, and when you're finished, you can go ahead and begin your presentation to the committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate you and the committee for allowing us to testify today on the Affordable Housing Act, or the Workforce Development Housing Act. We've been caressing that bill for a few years now. I have with me today Tammy Stansberry with Woda Cooper Companies. I have Mike Hines to my right, President and CEO of Winterwood Incorporated. And virtually, we have former state representative in Georgia, Brett Harrell, that'll be with us. So you're there, Brett, and you can hear us all right? I'd like to start off by saying beware of what you ask for. When I first come into office, there were several groups around that were looking for housing tax credits. One in particular was a veterans group was out looking and talking, looking for a sponsor. We had several others, elderly housing, workforce housing, substance abuse housing, chronic homelessness prevention, and most recently we have a growing number of young adults from the ages of 18 to 21 that's aging out of foster care. And looking at this, I just told them, I said, there's no way you're going to get 5 or 6 bills passed to do with housing and tax credits. And I told them, I said, but the only way I'd consider it is if you would do a comprehensive bill that included all these different entities and that would benefit the state as a whole. Well, I think that's what this bill does. We have been working on it for 3 years now. But with that, as many as you know, I've worked with the issue, and I have a group of advocates here that's joined me today that have come together to create the Commonwealth Allowance for Housing Solutions. The group represents individuals and companies, many names all of us know. They've come together because they, like myself, have come to see firsthand the dire need we have for housing solutions throughout our Commonwealth. Before the pandemic, our state, according to standards, was about 75,000 housing units short of what the need was. Now with the financial catastrophe that the pandemic's incurred, we've got skyrocketing construction costs and housing costs. The situation has reached a level of urgency that we've never seen before. I'm a real estate broker. I can tell you right now our inventory's never been lower. We've got people out knocking on doors asking if other people will sell their house. So, I'm sure as you consider this legislation, your main concern will be to ensure that it's financially responsible for our state. And because of that, in 2020, Danny Court, he's a principal and senior economist for Elliott D. Pollock and Company. He presented a study to confirm that if we were able to add, say, 6,500 units, housing units, that would generate an estimated $178 million in tax revenues for both state and local governments. And it would also create approximately 3,500 jobs during the period this was taking place. There are states already implementing this. One of our near states is Georgia. To reinforce the positive economic impact there, they have a similar tax credit options. And just for example, in 2016, they added 1,200 new units that generated $150 million in local income, $40 million in tax revenue for the government, and it created over 2,000 jobs. So that's just one example of what a tax credit, housing tax credit, could generate. There are 20 states that have passed similar legislation. There are 9 others considering it besides this bill here in Kentucky. Both Indiana and Ohio are considering it. Tennessee hasn't got there yet, and they are what I feel like to be our major competitors. And I'd like to see us get ahead of the game for once in the competing states. This bill, just to give you an idea, we're looking at probably about $12.5 million. But there are federal funds that are available that we would hope will be matching that, so we'll be looking at
influxing $25 million. It is for 5 years with a sunset clause, so that we will be forced, if it, in which I hope it, and I expect it to be a positive impact on our state, we would still have to come back in 5 years and reapprove it, reassess it, and everything. So it's not an ongoing thing. But basically, that's the nuts and bolts of it. I'll be glad to get into the weeds with you later on after my guests testify, or I'm available. You can give me a call. Any of the members can give me a call, and we'll discuss it other. But with that, I want to turn it over to Tammy with Woda Cooper Companies.
Good morning. I'm also the secretary of... Thank you. I'm also the secretary of the Kentucky Affordable Housing Coalition. I appreciate everybody listening to us this morning. I have been dealing in affordable housing corporation my entire career, which is 33 years. So I've seen all different aspects of what the need is here in the state of Kentucky. Due to the pandemic, as Representative Bridges stated, that we already knew we were 75,000 units short. Just recently, Jefferson County alone is in need of 35,000 more units. That's 35,000 more units of affordable housing they're going to need. I want to break down a little bit for you exactly what affordable housing is, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Affordable housing is not public housing, and it's not Section 8. There is no rent subsidy attached to affordable housing. Everybody who lives in one of our developments has to pay rent. They have to have income coming in. Those are the individuals that you see every day. They're your teachers just starting out, your police officers, your firefighters, your city clerks, the individuals that are working at Walmart. Those are the individuals that live in affordable housing units. Yeah, they can move into the market rate units, but those rents, as we know, are skyrocketed. And most of the time when they're living in the market rate units, they're paying well over 50% of their income towards their rent. That doesn't leave much money left for clothing, gas, food, and their utilities. So that's why the need for affordable housing is big here in the Commonwealth. And I want to give you a quick example of a community not far from Frankfort. Several years ago, I met with the mayor of this small town. They hadn't had any new development in this community in over 20-some odd years. So he asked, can you all come and do some housing here? We did a market study. The market study showed that in this community alone, there was a need of 320 units. So we went on and we developed, it was just 45 units at the time. When we got done with our development, we leased up this apartment complex within 3 months. And we immediately had a waiting list of 60 applicants. I remember when we had our grand opening, one of the residents that moved in, she was 72 years old. For the first time in her life, she had running water. It wasn't because she was poor. It was because there was no housing available in her county. She didn't want to move out of this county because this is where she grew up. This is where her family was. But there was no other housing available for her, so for 72 years, she went to the well to get her water. So she was excited to finally have hot water that she just went to a faucet and turned on. This is the impact that affordable housing has. In addition to that, the mayor, for the first time in this community, when we had to pay for our tap fees, for our water and our sewer, we had to pay over $160,000 to the city. That was money and income that came into this city that they had never seen before. The mayor, with that money, was able to do some revitalization. Because we built this development and there was more rooftops there, he was able to finally get a McDonald's and a CVS in this town. Now, everybody knows McDonald's are everywhere. So you can imagine if there's not a McDonald's in a town, there's a problem. Last year, in a town right next to this community I'm talking about, they had a 2-bedroom unit that came available. Within 6 hours, they received 70 calls for that 2-bedroom unit. That's really sad because that just shows you of how much housing is needed. This housing is not only for our workforce, because we're seeing we're getting all kinds of new development coming into the state, But without having affordable housing or places for these people to live, people aren't going to come in with the industry. So this also affects our economic development as well. It helps our veterans, and we know our veterans gave their lives to help us, but there are so many veterans out there who can't afford to live in market rate units. They make too much money to receive any type of rental assistance, so what is left? Affordable housing. We have our seniors, a lot of our seniors who have been in their homes for 40 some odd years. They're on limited incomes now, retirement or their Social Security. They don't have the means or the income anymore for the upkeep of their homes. So what's the next step for them? Well, for many of them, assisted living is too expensive. They can't go to assisted living. And for the majority of them, they don't need to be in a nursing home because they don't need that on everyday care. But they do need some place to live that is safe and affordable, where they're not alone. We have several senior developments throughout the state of Kentucky. And when COVID hit, we were very fortunate that we took the care that we needed for our residents, and none of our residents got COVID, but they also wasn't alone. They had their own community within themselves, so they weren't isolated. So we implore you to really look hard at this bill. It's a bill that is much needed here in the Commonwealth. It's a bill that we have been working on for several years. We have had several of you all in the Senate and the House over several years, at each various times, 20 of you all to sign off on this bill. But we need more. This is something that we need to get done. And at this point, I want to introduce former State Representative Brett Harrell. He is out of Georgia, where he was involved in getting the bill passed in Georgia, and he can tell you the impact that it has had on the state. So I thank you for your time. Brett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate you allowing me this morning to share my testimony on the success of Georgia's low-income housing tax credit program. Briefly about myself, I spent time as the mayor of a suburban city in Georgia of 18,000, spent 3 years on our State Department of Community Affairs Board. This is the state agency that oversees Georgia's low-income housing tax program, the applications, the awards, and the compliance. And then I spent 10 years in the Georgia House of Representatives, 8 years of that time on our Ways and Means Committee, which is the chief tax writing committee in Georgia House, and my final 2 years as chair of that committee. So in a word, has Georgia's low-income housing tax program been successful? Absolutely it has. We began the program in 2001, and since that time, it has created over 136,000 living units in the state of Georgia, providing a home for over 200,000 Georgians. And when you think of Georgia, it's understandable people think about Atlanta, and the metro regions of the state and the urban regions have certainly benefited from this program, but 50% of Georgia's population remains in rural parts of our state. And this program has benefited those communities equally as well. In 2020, the awards, just for a little information on our most recent funding year, 19 awards for projects went to rural projects for $13.5 million, providing 1,000 housing units. In 2020, 20 projects were awarded in urban communities for $18 million, providing 1,695 housing units. So out of the 2,700 units awarded in calendar year 2020, basically 50-50 urban and rural. And as Tammy stated, who lives in these projects? Well, as we've seen throughout our state, that exactly as she mentioned, it's many, often our government employees, our first line firefighters, police officers, often teachers, our factory workers, and people that are just joining the workforce, where with skyrocketing private market rental rates and housing prices simply can't qualify or afford fair market housing. What we've also seen over the last 3 or 4 years in Georgia is a dramatic increase in the need for senior housing. And over the last 3 years, the program applications, approximately half of those applications have been for senior housing. The last 3 years, our program funded 12,000 senior housing units. So by all accounts, it's been very helpful and successful in Georgia. And what about that return on investment for the investment of the state? Well, what I like about the program is rather than traditional public housing fully funded by our tax dollars, this is a program that incentivizes the private developer to come in and but for this program would not make an investment in a particular community. But because this program exists, makes a significant capital investment, providing this housing that is much needed. And in Georgia, it's a 30-year commitment by that developer. So, and the quality of the construction exceeds what our standards are in all the communities they go in. In Georgia, they're certified as sustainable construction, high efficiency appliances, LED lighting. So these are wonderful projects. They're wonderful properties that compete equally on aesthetics and quality of any private sector, free market type of product. But it meets the need of so many of those in our community, those just entering the workforce, those starting new careers, and those seniors that have been too often priced out of the market up until this time. So, Georgia has a number of times revisited the program over the years since its founding in 2001. Most recently in 2017 with a committee analysis and study. And each time that we've re-looked at the program and gone back to evaluate it, it is found to have been successful and meeting its desire, meeting the need, and something that, again, we are celebrating our 20th year of this particular tax credit in Georgia. And I believe it continues to deliver for our state and for the citizens that we are elected to represent. So I appreciate, again, the time to allow me to give you that quick overview, and be happy to answer questions as appropriate.
Representative Bridges, in light of our tight schedule, if you can maybe bring things to a close. I know you have another individual here. If you can just briefly share some of your thoughts. We do have a couple of questions here I want to get to, if you can do that.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's time this morning. My name is Mike Hines. I am the president and CEO of Winterwood Incorporated. We are headquartered out of Lexington. We are a property management firm. We work statewide, serve about 10,000 Kentucky families in approximately 80 counties throughout the Commonwealth. So we work all over. I can tell you that the housing need in our state is acute. I've in my 20 years in housing, I've not ever seen conditions this tight, a market this tight. As we think about going forward and poising Kentucky to position itself for the future, I don't know how we are going to attract the employers that we need with our housing market in the current condition that it is. So that's the brevity, as brief as I could make it, and I appreciate the time, and thank you all very much.
And I appreciate that, and I do. At this time, we have several questions. Senator Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I agree with the concept and principle, but I guess my thoughts are, if there's such a need, why necessarily do we need a tax credit in order to do this? Rates as far as interest go are as cheap as my banker told me that it's the cheapest he's ever seen, and he's been in the business 40 years. I just refinanced and got a 2.125% interest rate. And, I know I have an uncle in South Carolina that, is involved in some subsidized housing. And he thinks it's a great source of income because it's pretty secure. It's a very secure income given the government subsidy on the rent. So I don't know necessarily why we would need a tax credit in order to encourage people to get into this. If you could maybe elaborate on that.
I can real quickly. One thing to think about is a lot of the look at the groups we're targeting here, the elderly who are on fixed income, limited income. We've got veterans. We just had yesterday 2 generals testify, I think, in VMAP, Fort Campbell and Fort Knox, that they cannot find housing for the individuals coming there to work. And some of them from Fort Knox, I think, are driving all the way from Louisville over an hour just so that they can find some kind of housing. The alternative, what was mentioned, is government low-income housing, which is Section 8, which we fund, and they pay a high rate of rent. At home, my Section 8 housing's paying $750 a month, when some of the others that don't qualify are paying $600 and $650. They're paying over that, and the government is paying that. So there are some cost savings when we look at that, and this is to not only just for the housing part, but it's for the economic development part too. The additional tax revenues coming in, the new building, the new construction, and all that. And right now, construction costs are through the roof. It is absolutely. I had someone approach me about buying my house, and I thought I can get good money out of it. I'm gonna make more than I ever will, you know. And people saying two fools met when he offered it, and I wouldn't take it. But when I got to looking at replacing that house, it was going to cost me more than that, and I would have ended up in greater debt already. So I don't know if that answers part of it. Maybe Tammy can help.
Yeah, so the reason the state credit is so beneficial is, and you're right, interest rates are lower. So when you're when you develop something using the finance of the housing tax credit, so we get an allocation and it's awarded through the state housing agency, which is Kentucky Housing Corporation. Say, and I'm going to just use some easy numbers. Say I ask for $500,000 in credit through Kentucky Housing Corporation. I get that $500,000 in credit. I then turn around and investors want to invest in that $500,000 because they can use that $500,000 as a tax write-off. I can't. So therefore, let's say, and I'm just going to use some simple numbers, say they buy that $500,000 tax credits from me for $1 per credit. That's now $5 million I have going in towards my development. My development, let's say, is $8 million. So now I've got $3 million gap. My mortgage is now at $3 million. And at an interest rate that you're right. But what that signifies is I can now lower my rent to be more affordable because my mortgage is lower due to the housing tax credit. If I went out and borrowed the full $8 million in credit, my mortgage is going to be skyrocketed, which means I'm going to have to increase my rents in order to offset that income. So that's why there's a difference between affordable housing and market rate housing. Market rate, they can charge whatever they want for the rents, but it's not affordable. So that's the need for the credit in order to keep the rents lower. And I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very informative.
One more question from Representative King, and I'm going to ask those that have additional questions to reach out to the sponsor to get clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do have two questions. I'll save one for offline. Planning and zoning, I didn't see anything to the contrary in your draft, but this doesn't affect planning and zoning from local officials at all. They still have the same parameters. I just wanted to clarify that.
There's still local control over all that.
Perfect.
One thing I do want to mention real quick, Mr. Chair, is that my primary co-sponsor is Representative Banta. She's out of town, was not able to be here today, but you can reach me or her, either one, if you have any questions on this.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Again, members that had questions, please reach out to Representative Bridges or Representative Banta for clarification. Thank you. Our next item will be an update on the apprenticeship program.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Folks that are online, if you will, the folks that will be presenting today, if you'll go ahead now and introduce yourselves, and then after you've done that, go ahead and begin the presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Marty Hammonds. I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Workforce Investment. Joining me is Michelle Dejean. She is the Executive Director for the Office of Employer Apprenticeship Services, and she will be providing the presentation today. So thank you for this opportunity to share with you the benefits of registered apprenticeship and the interest that employers are sharing. So thank you for your time.
Super. Sure. Thank you again. I just want to do a little sound check, and I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
No.
Not yet.
There we go.
Awesome. I'm going to do a little, just to double check the right screen. My apologies. This is the one I want to share. Awesome. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm very excited to be with you. Am I showing the slide deck?
Yes, we can see the screen. Your slides.
Super.
We can see them.
Super. Thank you very much. My name is Michelle Dejean, and as the commissioner had said, I'm the executive director of the Kentucky Career Center's Office of Employer and Apprenticeship Services. I'm very excited to be here today to tell you about the United States Department of Labor Registered Apprenticeship Program. I wanted to note a couple of things. We are the state approving agency for registered apprenticeship. We are one of 30 states. As a state approving agency, it's a benefit to us because we have state funds to support registered apprenticeship. We're also responsible and accountable for registered apprenticeship across the state. And also as a state approving agency, we have the capabilities of working with an employer of developing and designing a registered apprenticeship program on an occupation that may not be documented by the Department of Labor. As a state approving agency, we have developed 2 programs in the real estate sales agency and the library technician. I wanted to just share everyone where we are in the whole government structure. We are in the Kentucky Cabinet for Education and Workforce Development, in the Department for Workforce Investment, and of course, the Office of Employer and Apprenticeship Services of the Kentucky Career Center system. We are the office to support the work that we do with businesses across the Commonwealth. And here are a couple of pictures of Kentucky apprentices, Kentucky registered apprenticeships across the Commonwealth. I'm going to take a few minutes to tell everyone about registered apprenticeship. Registered apprenticeship is your grow your own earn and learn succeed model. I often, when I talk to employers, it's the original 4-year degree program. It provides a paycheck from day one and a wage increase as apprentices become more proficient. In a registered apprenticeship program, a minimum of 1 wage increase is required. And it combines the on-the-job training and the related job instruction. What is another benefit of registered apprenticeship? It results in an industry recognized credential signed by Commissioner Hammonds and Lieutenant Governor Coleman, but also that credential goes into a national database. So that employee, after completing their apprenticeship experience, has a credential that is portable nationwide, showing and validating that they are skilled in that particular occupation. Registered apprenticeship develops a skilled, trained career employee, reduces workmen's compensation through mentoring, and could assist employers in their procurement processes. But wait, there's more. Registered apprenticeship provides a positive impact on loyalty, productivity, and profitability. Data and research shows registered apprenticeship shows a $1.46 return on every dollar spent. It reduces turnover via the employer contribution to the business. Employees or apprentices in registered apprenticeship feel like they're contributing to the business. The wage increase over a time-based program or a competency-based program incentivizes them to develop, and that is directly related to employee loyalty and productivity, which overall affects the profitability of the business. It lowers the cost of recruitment. It stabilizes an employer's talent pipeline. It increases knowledge transfer. And registered apprenticeship is for everyone. In close, I just wanted everyone to know that registered apprenticeship is a workforce solution that can take someone who knows nothing about an occupation and turn them into a skilled career employee by their apprenticeship, which means it addresses recruitment, training, and retention. At the Kentucky Career Center's Office of Employer and Apprenticeship Services, we're working. Here is a program overview. We have Kentucky State General Funding and 2 federal registered apprenticeship grants that we're working with. One is scheduled to end June of next year, and the second is scheduled to end in June of 2023. I don't do it alone. We have an excellent team here at the Office of Employer and Apprenticeship Services. Mr. Tim Wireman has joined the team to help us improve our services and work better with our skilled trades. Lawrence Winburn, Angela Rivers, and Sean Campbell are passionate, dedicated, registered apprenticeship training representatives. And I'm going to share some numbers with you to share how they've grown and developed the program just in this calendar year. And then Mr. Joe Paul is on the team for our reporting purposes. This is interesting. Here's a map. I've taken registered apprenticeship. I've mapped the data to show us, because I want to be targeted and strategic in how I grow registered apprenticeship in our state. So here is, we're registered apprenticeship sponsors or employers who have registered apprenticeship programs here in the Commonwealth. I'm going to tell you later that we're working on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what I'm doing is we have outreach consultants who are in a regionally based team who are educating the employers where I don't have registered apprenticeship sponsors about the benefits of registered apprenticeship. Here's another really colorful map just to share with you all. In addition to have state registered apprenticeship sponsored programs, we also have Department of Labor nationally registered apprenticeship programs across our Commonwealth. So we have state sponsored programs and then national sponsored programs. The blue dots are our state programs. And then the orange is where we have a national registered apprenticeship program here in Kentucky. Let's talk about some numbers, a statistical snapshot. As of September 17th, we have 590 registered apprenticeship programs here in the Commonwealth. Registered apprenticeship, and with 347 unique registered apprenticeship sponsors in our state, with 585 registered apprenticeship occupations. I wanted to share with you some of our outreach in regards to 8.12% of our apprentices are in the minority, 16.69% are women, 4.68 of them are veterans. And for the calendar year of 2021, we've completed 572 registered apprenticeship credentialed programs. We also are working with the Department of Education's TRACK program. If you don't know what TRACK is, it's Tech Ready Apprentices for Careers in Kentucky. We have over 400 youth apprentices in the TRACK program and 80 plus employers working with our youth. I wanted to give you just a snapshot of some registered apprenticeship sponsors, local and nationwide. These are employers who have registered apprenticeship programs. These are employers who are growing their own talent to address their recruitment here in Kentucky. What have we been doing over the last year in growth, diversification, and registered apprenticeship programs? The registered apprenticeship team has added 29 new programs, 44 new occupations just in this calendar year. I'm meeting approximately with 3 to 5 employers a week to share the benefits or why to have a registered apprenticeship program. You guys can see, and you all have copies of the positions from dental assistants to child development specialists to, of course, a horse trainer has just joined the registered apprenticeship. Other initiatives, we're campaigning for diversity, equity, and inclusion in our outreach and education to where we don't have registered apprenticeship programs, to also working with other state agencies and workforce development partners, and showing that registered apprenticeship is a solution to our state's workforce needs. We've established a shared email account, and staff are developing, we're improving our website, and we've also working with several employers of providing related technical instruction. We've also continued and enhanced our partnerships with the youth in the TRACK program. Another success of this year is we signed our first memorandum of agreement with the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division. We directly meet and work with Wage and Hour and provide employer education and outreach with matters such as child labor law matters and points of contact. We are fully integrated with all of our partners. We recently presented at the Kentucky Statewide Human Resource Conference. We participate in high school career events to educate apprentices and employers on registered apprenticeship. In our technology upgrades, we're developing an apprenticeship tracking system for workforce partner agency SharePoint site. We're making progress in reporting our registered apprenticeship data for all federal reporting. We are up to date in all reporting. What do we need to keep registered apprenticeship here in Kentucky and to continue to grow registered apprenticeship? Funding for additional employer support is needed. At this time, there are 3 dedicated staff that are assisting and supporting and providing technical assistance to currently 590 programs, which are growing every week. Also, I just wanted to plant the seed or to let the chairman and the committee know. We don't have a state tax credit in regards to incentivize employers to participate. I talk to employers routinely that they can't find individuals. Well, as a solution to their workforce pain points, I talk to them about considering registered apprenticeship and growing your own talent. And to incentivize that, these are the other states that offer a tax credit. And so that is my overview to give you guys an update on registered, or to give everyone an update on registered apprenticeship. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question for you. What is the average starting salary of an apprentice who completes the program and starts working?
That varies based on the occupation, because there currently are over 1,200 registered apprenticeship occupations. From the horse trainer, maybe one wage. So I can do some research and try to find to see if there is an average wage, but it varies across the spectrum. So,
all right, thank you. Any other members have questions? Commissioner Hammonds and Director Dejean, thank you for coming. I know the apprenticeship program is something that I've followed and this committee has followed for a number of years. I think it has great potential. And certainly good to see it growing. Certainly in the next few years, when we begin to return to normal in our economy, we're going to see that program really flourish and expand further. But I want to thank you all for coming today and presenting to the committee.
Super.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you,
Commissioner Hammonds.
I was just saying thank you, sir.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you all. All right, our last presentation for today, we are going to hear from the Kentucky Guild of Brewers. This is an organization that has been before this committee a number of times in the past with specific legislation that has helped this industry grow and flourish. I think this is an example of entrepreneurship in the state and how when government is able to step back and let you do what you love to do, you can flourish and grow. And it had been a while since we'd had an opportunity to have you come. A number of members of this committee are new, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to come and present to the committee. So if you'll introduce yourselves for the record, and after you've done so, go ahead and jump right into the presentation, Adam.
My name is Adam Watson. I'm a reformed attorney, owner-operator of Against the Grain Brewery, and chair of legislative affairs for the Kentucky Guild of Brewers.
My name is Charlie Hamilton. I own Dreaming Creek Brewery in Richmond, Kentucky, and I am the president of the Kentucky Guild of Brewers.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the members of this committee for inviting us to speak today. I want to start off with thank you to the General Assembly and to all the legislators who have helped Kentucky's craft brewers over the last several years, especially last session. While we have had several setbacks, you've been extraordinarily supportive, and that support has enabled us to survive. Please know how much we appreciate that. Now, the PowerPoint in your packet may seem a little long, don't worry. Several slides are included to afford the committee additional information, but are not part of what I'll speak to. You will notice several pictures scattered throughout, because sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. We want to respect your time today, so I will move pretty quickly through some of these slides and speak just to the substantive update material. Charlie and I would be happy to answer additional questions. One question we hear a lot is, what does craft mean? This slide is to detail for you exactly how small Kentucky's breweries are in the context of the rest of the country. While the TTB places the threshold at 2 million barrels of production annually, and our national organization draws the line at 6 million, Kentucky microbrewers are limited to 50,000 barrels of annual production. So even our larger members are still truly small. Don't let our size fool you, though. We have an outsized impact on communities and for the Commonwealth due to our participation in manufacturing, retail, hospitality, and tourism sectors. We're part of the small business backbone of Kentucky employment. While we get as excited as anyone about big announcements, please remember that small businesses like ours make up 99.3% of employers here in Kentucky, almost 365,000 of us. That impact is further amplified by our diversity of business models. Kentucky Brewers invest locally, employ locally, enhance communities locally, and spend money on local vendors and tradespeople. Also, we generate tax revenue at all levels of government. As you can see here, when I say the impact is local, I mean it's somewhere near you. If you haven't visited your local Kentucky brewery, we'd love to have you. And if you have, come on back. So, what's the state of our industry? How are things going? Overall, beer in the U.S. was down 3%, but the bigger story is craft beer was down 9%. The pandemic and its ramifying effects have focused consumer purchasing on larger, cheaper national brands and have resulted in decreased production volumes, sales volumes, and revenues. Supply chain disruptions, lack of material availability, and employment disruptions have made our business more expensive and less predictable. COVID requirements have forced us into unfamiliar and often unprofitable business models in an attempt to retain our customers and our employees. Even with these setbacks, Kentucky's craft brewing still had $872 million of impact here in the Commonwealth, according to the Brewers Association staff economist. That's not an insignificant amount. From 2018 to 2019, we saw a 15% growth in our employment numbers and had over 1,000 Kentuckians on our payrolls. But the pandemic did force many furloughs and layoffs. Now we're struggling to regain those employment numbers due to a combination of revenue shortages and labor shortages. Our focus remains right here at home, though Kentucky breweries do continue to pursue new markets by exporting our products to over 40 states and multiple countries. At our most recent count, there are now 93 craft breweries in Kentucky, operated by 77 different craft brewery operators. We're aware of at least 10 more breweries currently in planning. Despite pandemic impacts and setbacks, at least 27 Kentucky breweries have prioritized investing here in the Commonwealth during the pandemic and have invested in some form of expansion activity like new locations, additional production equipment, facility improvements. Such new investments and expansions total about $27.7 million so far. COVID has hit us all differently, though, and this isn't the case for all of us. Some of our members are digging deep into their own pockets just to survive, and many of us have canceled expansions. Some are still at significant risk of closure. Thanks to the General Assembly last session, self-distribution has been a lifeline that provides a new avenue for breweries to expand sales volumes and meet customer demands. It affords us much-needed flexibility and has leveled the playing field. In accordance with new statutory language, some brewers are already self-distributing, with others to follow soon. We've seen gains in other areas of our industry, specifically our pursuit of diversity. We have about a dozen female brewers around the state, including our own Kentucky chapter of the Pink Boots Society. We can't rest on our laurels, though, especially during this time of recovery. We have to keep our foot on the gas if we want to make it through. During the height of the pandemic, not only did we see massive declines and closures at our tap rooms, we also saw a massive decline in our distribution sales to bars and restaurants who had to stop buying our products, and distributors stopped picking up. Those of us who had the ability to can our products retained some sales, even as consumers pivoted towards those larger national brands. But those relying on kegs were quickly reduced to nearly zero sales. The recovery has looked different for each of us, but supply chain disruptions and labor issues are two pandemic impacts that continue to be the reality for all of us equally. I know you've heard those continuing impacts from other industry sectors as well. These ongoing issues have kept our recovery from being greater, quicker, or smooth. The recent surge of the Delta variant has caused even more uncertainty as canceled events and spreading illness have caused decreased demand. Kentucky microbreweries have tried to pivot business when possible and have become masters of efficiency. But price increases across the board have made it difficult to capitalize on the package boom that many retailers saw with their national brands. Further, the investments made to comply with pandemic requirements, PPE provisions, and more during a time with low or no income and reduced demand added further financial burdens and costs. While we understood and support doing everything possible to keep our employees and our customers healthy and safe, it was an additional and an unanticipated cost. Some members invested in plans to use the direct-to-consumer privileges granted to us in June of 2020, but regulatory and licensing delays meant we couldn't access those markets until January of 2021, after the crucial holiday shopping season had already taken place, during a year with outstanding online spending. Now we're trying to build enough revenue during the current viral surge to survive a slowdown that traditionally happens to the hospitality industry during the winter. Key takeaways of pandemic impacts and issues impacting our recovery are the continuation of the pandemic with the Delta variant, supply chain disruptions, delays, or complete inability to get needed items, employment challenges, increased and unexpected costs, and the loss now of critical summer months in both 2020 and 2021, which was limited. Those are prime revenue times that help us weather the winter months, which tend to be slower for us. To speak honestly, we just weren't prepared for an 18-month emergency that's still going on. The Kentucky craft brewing industry is, technically speaking, still up, but we are seeing our slowest growth in 11 quarters, due to all the factors you see identified on the slides. We are indeed recovering, but it's slow, and it's inconsistent. We continue to prioritize support of our employees and our customers, as well as our communities, through these tough times, so I humbly request that you support us, Kentucky small businesses. Come by and have a pint or a meal. Out on those retailer shelves, reach for Kentucky Craft. Here you see a small sampling of our community involvement, including vaccination outreach, Department of Agriculture cooperation, charitable contributions and involvement, local events, fundraisers, and more. And as you can see here, we have opened a few new locations since we last presented to this committee, so I encourage you to visit as many as you'd like. Just let me know if you'd like an introduction. As for legislative interests, we continue to support the same principles we've espoused for years. We need your support to compete with other breweries across the region and the nation. We believe in modernization of laws to match business practices, and we support flexibility and the reduction of artificial barriers to the market. We would ask for our industry's inclusion in any discussions to reform the alcohol tax structure, and we will, of course, remain vigilant against any regressive changes that would undo our privileges or stifle growth, competition, and access to the marketplace. In closing, here are just a few of the beautiful faces and spaces at our breweries. Amongst them, you'll see chemists, biologists, veterans and veterinarians, attorneys and artists. So don't be fooled by the fact that we all have beards. Well, most of us. Finally, on behalf of all of Kentucky's fantastic craft breweries, thank you again so much for your support. Please, come see us sometime.
Adam, thank you for your presentation. We do have one question here, and then I have a question. Senator Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I enjoyed your presentation, and unfortunately I'm an unreformed attorney, but I would love to be able to do what you're doing. I am. Having studied and taught English for a year in Germany, I always loved going to all the different small towns because you would have a brewery in just about every one, and the variety was really great. Need I say, I guess the catchword, the diversity of brews throughout the entire country were really wonderful, and I really enjoyed doing that. And I'm proud to support your industry. One thing you mentioned, you said that there's a lack of access to kegs and for some of the small brewers. Do you have any idea, is that a disruption in the supply chain, or what exactly is that the result of? Do you know?
It's a fairly complex situation, and I know pieces of it, but I'd be fooling myself if I said I understood all of it. Primarily, we've seen shortage in things like cans, because many breweries have pivoted towards having to can more of their product rather than keg it, due to the fact that most of the keg serving locations, like bars and restaurants, were closed for so long. So we got a real pinch on cans for a long time, and that still hasn't eased up yet. The whole supply chain across the globe is kind of coming back in fits and starts.
Are most of those manufactured, the cans, in the United States, or is that something that has to be sourced globally normally?
Most of them are manufactured here. That's often with materials here, although sometimes they involve materials from other places. So the whole chain, as it continues to tug on itself, has created sometimes unexpected costs and delays for us.
Well, just keep doing what you're doing. I'm proud to support the industry, and I thank you for coming here today.
I appreciate that. And anytime you want to still reform, we can teach you to brew.
You up on that, but my wife probably wouldn't like it.
Senator Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's very appropriate that one of the things I caught in your presentation was that you wanted to make it very clear that several of your breweries are still struggling, and I think that's very important for us to realize. If we're not I'm in a small business, and there are folks that have done really well during this pandemic, but there is a very narrow swath of small businesses that are struggling and still hanging on by their fingernails, and they've gotten PPP loans. They've gotten those loans forgiven, and it's just important for us to realize that there's still that lane in our economy that is still struggling, and we need to do everything we can, from individually supporting those businesses to, if there's things legislatively that we can do, or just get out of their way so that they can, make a comeback. But additionally, your folks in Henderson, Western Kentucky are good advocates for the craft breweries, and they're constantly in contact with me, and I stop in and visit them quite often. So congratulations on being here today, and thank you for the update.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Southworth.
Thank you. And I wanted to go back to one of the comments that you made about small business, because you just barely touched it. And I want you to expand a little. How many economic incentives do any of you or your members get when you're starting or expanding a business, compared to, like you mentioned, large businesses with these magnet numbers of money?
Sure. We of course, the story differs from member to member very, very drastically. And some of us were able to access more programs and some fewer based on our business models and the ways that we operate. I think a lot of us were able to access some of the emergency measures that have come out over the course of the pandemic. But over the sort of regular operating times, aside from pandemic-specific incentive programs, there are a few, but I don't think we see quite the array of incentives that are offered to some of those higher dollar investments.
Can you just give an example, if it's middle of the road, or even if it's not, just figures to get our brains into a place? You're opening something tomorrow. Here's who you went to and kind of how many choices there were, what there was available.
I can speak to that a little bit. Our main location is in Richmond, Kentucky. We opened a second location in London. Polar opposites in what we were able to get access to. And it's a lot because of the monies that go into those communities via hospitality taxes. Richmond does not have that. Louisville does not have that, I doubt. Lexington as well. London and other smaller communities have differing taxes, so they're able to give more incentives for small businesses to come to those places. We got a lot more incentive to come to London than we did in Richmond. We got nothing in Richmond. We did it all on our own. We did have, they helped us with finding a location. They helped us with financing that location a little bit. They found us somebody to finance it, which was SCED, Southern Kentucky Economic Development, and helped us through that process. So there was just a lot of, not necessarily a lot of money, but a lot of hand-holding and help to make it happen fast.
Thank you.
Any other members? So, Adam, one of the things that's intrigued me about your industry is that when we've been able to, even prior to removing some of the barriers that you had, you were still had a trajectory where you were growing. And when we removed those, it added even more opportunity. And I'm looking at this map, and I know there are tremendous areas in the state where you could see growth. I think it's interesting that even given the whole COVID pandemic, you still have 10 locations that are potentially opening in the state. I see 5 of those are in Jefferson County, Louisville. So I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit. Where would you have seen the craft brewing industry had we not had COVID? And then as we come out of that, hopefully soon, where do you see the industry in the next few years? I mean, are you waiting for these opportunities, for things to clear before we start to see even greater growth? If you can just kind of shed some light, because I'm sure you're talking to folks in other areas, and I can understand the apprehension that some folks would have in opening up a facility in this type of environment. But if you can just speak to that for us, please.
Sure. I don't find myself prone to speculate too much, so this is a little outside my my general operations. But yeah, I think we do have an industry where people get into it because of passion, which is why you saw us still succeeding before a lot of these laws came into effect to begin helping us. And then you're correct, that absolutely threw fuel on the fire and kind of getting out of the way enabled us to work hard as we find ourselves prone to do. The pandemic definitely threw, as I detailed in the presentation, a monstrous wrench in the works. But I think it is more a delay than a stopping. I think most of our members have found ways to be efficient and to sort of batten down the hatches and find a way to grind through the problems, and are waiting to continue expansions that perhaps we had conceived of prior to the pandemic and start executing those post-pandemic. We are trying to be cautious about it, and I think a lot of people are waiting until something resembling predictability starts to come back into our economy, and then we'll start looking at where else to do things. I do know that a lot of, as you'll see from the map, a lot of the large hubs of breweries do tend to be around our borders, and I'd be lying if I said that there aren't breweries that are looking to see what states do coming out of this. And how they behave to figure out where they want to spend their investments.
Thank you for that. We do have one question from Representative Beckler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How many of your microbreweries are pushing against the 50,000 barrel limit?
Right now in pandemic times, I'd say very few. I think we had a pretty good handful that were on trajectory to hit that over the next few years. But as I said, pretty much everyone's productions are down fairly significantly. Hopefully we recover quickly enough that starts to be an issue. But I think speaking as of today, not very many are right there at the cusp.
So the 50,000 barrel limit is not currently a negative factor for y'all?
Again, today, no, but over the next couple of years, assuming we manage to come out of this on fire like we plan to, I could see it being a topic of discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The great thing about texting is that people can text me while I'm up here. So I do have a question that has come in.
Sure.
You mentioned barriers that would hold back. What legislatively do you see as barriers right now that we could be thinking about?
Right now, I don't really want to speak to that because we haven't managed to vet any of those across all of our membership, and I don't want to speak out of turn for members that haven't had a chance to weigh in on it. So I think right now we more want to espouse the general principle of letting us do the business that we do.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Any other additional questions? Again, thank you, gentlemen, for coming and appearing for the committee. Always a lot of good information we learn from your presentation. I appreciate you coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the committee, just to note, we will be meeting at our next meeting will be October the 21st at 9 a.m. Senator Schroeder will be chairing that meeting. I want to thank everyone for participating today and having some good questions. At this moment, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
We are adjourned.